Well, hello there. This is Virtuals the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Merch at chessnoob64.com. Yesterday I played this game against the Caro-Kann Defense, but I found it really interesting that my opponent played a line that I had never seen before, an early g3, and the variation is named after 20th century Georgian Grandmaster Gurgenidze. It's really interesting, so let's go take a look. At the end, I have a very lovely line of checkmate, which I wanted to show you. Now, I've got the white pieces, of course, and e4, and the Caro-Kann c6. Against that, of course, full center. They play that usual move, and of course now knight c3, and now g6. So this is the Gurgenidze variation, again, sort of named after the Georgian Grandmaster, who I think passed away in 2008. And the really interesting thing here, and I had a bit of a think about what to do, is that this is a really complicated system. So technically, you know, like with most modern hypermodern type systems, it's better for white, but it's very tricky to play with black. Here, there are a number of moves for both black and white, which are basically equally good. So I decided to play the knight here. But, you know, when I sort of looked on Stockfish during the analysis, potentially I could push e5, I could play h4. These are all potentially good and almost equal. Now here, black has a number of options as well. So logically, you know, you would probably want to fianchetto your bishop. That's probably the logic there, but you could take it immediately. This bishop move is apparently quite good as well. And again, all these moves are about equally good. Here, I decide to capture, to sort of just relieve that tension in the center, but you can see any of these moves, these bishops to those two squares, this bishop to those two squares, or h3, immediately sort of asking the bishop what it's doing there, they're all about equal. So when there are so many options in the opening, it means that if you become a master and you study that particular opening, you'll probably get an advantage over your opponent because you'll just know the intricacies and the variations better. Now here I suspect my opponent in the 1300s was probably freestyling because logically you would probably play the fianchetto. Let's see what happens. Takes. Here I decide to move my queen out of that pin, so freeing up that knight, also defending that way, but you can see Stockfish thinks a number of other possible moves. They play a6, which is actually a good move, and here I decide to attack that bishop. So provocative move, not necessarily the best move. Stockfish reckons developing first is better. They move the bishop back, attacking the queen. Again here, any number of moves. I eventually chose e2, but probably equally good was queen f3 or queen back to d1. However, I wanted to sort of keep vision on the c2 pawn because at this point I already saw there was a potential attack on the bishop, and you know, that bishop's now moved twice. And this is where black actually made a blunder, a mistake. Can you see what the mistake is? Oh, I let it slip already, didn't I? There is a g4, and by closing off the light squares around their light square bishop with pawns, it's basically trapped because pretty much every square here is protected by one of my pieces. So black here pretty much is forced to trade their bishop for my knight. So here we go, attack here, take. So I win a pawn, basically. Black also loses their bishop pair, but more than that, I've also got much more development than black. Black basically has no developed pieces. I've got queen in a very nice position, looking at b7. That knight is potentially in a very nice, powerful square as well. I'm doing well. This is about +3. Now, here black really needed to do something about that b7 pawn, so potentially they could guard it with rook a7, but the best move probably was queen to d5, which basically forces a trade of queens. But no, they decide to give a check first, but I can just block with that pawn. They decide to try to Yes, interesting. Interesting there because take with yeah. Not too sure why they wanted to do that. I decide to just defend here. Stockfish was unafraid. They reckon immediately take that pawn, but I thought let's keep things solid. They decided to try to crack things open. That was probably a mistake. You can see. Best move, probably force the trade or to bring the bishop all the way back. So here, captures. This bishop basically becomes a glorified pawn, replacing that pawn in that chain. Very nice. And that blocks, the entry of the queen. They bring the queen back. That's fine. I decide to push that pawn forward now because I didn't want the knight moving this way with an attack. So they develop the knight that way. That's fine. I now form a very, very nice battery, potentially forcing a trade. They, develop the knight. That's fine. I'm up on material. So trades. And now this pawn is pinned. And so d5, attacking the knight. Also opening up that diagonal for the rook. I was really, really pleased to have seen that. They decide to save their knight, which makes sense. Remember, that is still pinned. I take, they capture this way. I now short castles, king tucked in, nice and safe. They're still controlling, that battery still exists. Really, really happy. And black is basically lost here. Basically, I just need to find the win. They move their queen. I push that forward so that I free up that rook. They don't have very many options. They decide to long castles. The chess.com analytic engine doesn't even call that a bad move. But at high depth, when I use an external Stockfish, there's a mate in no more than 13 if you play accurately. And the first move is pretty obvious. Let's bring the rook to the c file, so rook ac1 with check. Now the best move for the king is probably to bring it to b8. However, they decide to block with the knight, which of course is now pinned. And here there's a mate in 6. And I'm really proud of this because I actually saw and calculated the whole sequence before I played the first move. Admittedly, it's not that hard to see, but it's very, very nice. So firstly, remember that battery. Yep, so let's whack. So queen captures b7 with check. King now forced here. Now rook fd1, check. King basically forced into that position. Now, I can just straight up take, but I decided to not do that here yet. Instead, what I decided to do was to bring the queen around. Now, obviously, that knight is defended by the queen with check. That forces the king to that square, bishop back to f6 with check. King is now forced to that square because everything's defended. And now rook captures rook with check. They have to block with the knight. That's their only move. Queen captures knight. Mate. Good game. GG. Now, this was a really interesting line of the Caro-Kann and one that I think I will investigate a little bit further. However, the big takeaway from this game is to be careful trapping your own bishop with your pawn moves. That was basically what led to my opponent to lose this match. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.